Hello Internet, and welcome to another tutorial video for Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. Today we will be talking about the revive mechanic in the game, giving you the basics for how to deal with it and explaining that it does more than just make zombies eventually stand up. So first off, I want to say that I recommend you leave this enabled. It is possible to use mods and disable this feature, but I don't think that that's a great idea. I see a lot of new players say that this mechanic is annoying and that they don't like it, but I think that it becomes routine to deal with after a while, and it adds a mild level of strategy to certain choices that you make. But I guess we will talk about that later though. Let's talk about the mechanic itself first. So what is zombie, God, I hate this word, revivification? I can never say that word. I'm saying zombies revive. Basically, many enemies in the game will resurrect after a period of time. I've never seen exact numbers on how long it takes for them to revive, but I believe it's a randomized value that is always around 6 hours. I don't think that it actually matters what the enemy is, it will always be around that 6-hour mark. Now, in older versions of the game, only zombies that you killed or that died while playing would resurrect. However, in the last year or two, the game has been updated so that many other enemies will now resurrect into zombie creatures even if they weren't zombies initially. For example, we now have zombie animals, so when you kill, say, a bear, it will revive into a zombie bear if you fail to deal with the carcass. This is also true for NPCs and human corpses. They will eventually get back up as zombies if you leave them alone. So if you are a returning player, you need to get into the habit of dealing with all corpses, not just zombies. And the easiest way to see if a corpse needs pulped or not is to check its indicator. Most of the common tile sets have a small indicator to show that they will eventually resurrect. In Ultica, it is this small yellow yield symbol. Additionally, corpses that need to be pulped will also be color-coded yellow, so even if your tile set has no indicator, you can still see if something needs dealt with. Well, now the reason that this happened, well actually maybe I shouldn't give spoilers, but basically the zombies in this game, they're not traditional zombies. For example, a headshot on our zombies would not kill them the way it would in a Romero movie. In fact, the only way to stop a zombie in this game is to damage the body so significantly that it cannot revive. And that's how we stop them from resurrecting. There are 3 main ways to do this. The 2 main methods are pulping and dismemberment. These are the fastest and can be done with very basic tools. Pulping means that you've smashed the body to the point that the spoilery thing that reanimates enemies can't do it anymore. And dismemberment means you're cutting them up for the same end result. The final method is burning the corpse to the point that it is fully consumed, but that is much less ideal and a little bit harder to do. You will pulp an enemy by using the lowercase s key to smash their corpse. This does prevent the enemy from reviving if you are able to complete the action. Being interrupted will mean that you have to try it again. And be aware that smashing a corpse does take time. In my testing, it was about 7 seconds. You don't require any tools or anything to smash a corpse. You can do so with your bare hands if you need to. However, some enemies, specifically acid enemies, should not be pulped using the smash command. They have a flag that gives them a chance of splashing the player with acid, which is actually can be a pretty significant source of damage. If you want to protect yourself from that acid splash and you don't want the enemy reviving, you will use dismembering or fire instead. Now the second option for you is to dismember the corpse. This represents your character chopping up the carcass, I guess. You do this by pressing the capital B key to open the butchery menu. You will then select the corpse that you want to dismember and you will choose the dismember option. Dismember takes a little longer than simply smashing a corpse, and the time required, I believe, is based on what butchery tools you have. It is worth noting that at least in the current version that I'm using here, the dismember option will appear in this menu even if you don't have the tools it requires. But when you attempt to execute the butchery action, it will then inform you that you need a tool with at least a cutting quality of 1. And again, you should not smash the corpses of acid enemies, and you should instead use this dismember option. You can also use the other butchery options. They will also stop the enemy from reviving. So if you're harvesting a cow for meat, that will then also stop that cow from coming back as a zombie. It's just that the dismember option is the fastest option in the butchery menu, and it's the one you should use if you're just trying to quickly deal with a carcass. And of course, if you don't care about meat. If it's something that you want meat from, you should use the other butchery options because obviously that makes more sense. And then the final option for dealing with revivification is to burn the body. Now, I almost never do this. It's a little bit more involved and I find it a bit unnecessary when the other options are much faster and easier. Basically, you will take the corpse and dump it into a big fire, and eventually it will burn away to nothing. Now, this does take time though. The fire only burns properly when you're nearby, so you can't burn it and then just leave the area. It doesn't work that way. And besides that, if an enemy were to revive while it's in the fire or on fire or whatever, it will just be converted to a different type of zombie. You actually have to burn the body completely so that it will not resurrect in the future. Oh, and oops, I forgot something, so I'm going to quickly add it in here. We do have the ability to auto pulp corpses. I know that one of the major complaints with this system is that it's a lot of repetitive key presses, but there are two ways to get around that. The first way is to have an NPC companion or two. You can tell them to auto pulp nearby corpses. Now, I don't usually play with NPCs, so this one isn't really for me, but it is an option. And then the second way is to have your character automate this process using our in-game settings. These automated settings exist for a few different things in the game, and you can see your options in the settings menu under General on lines 3 through 14. Now, if you want to auto pulp or auto butcher, you will first need to enable auto features on line 10 and then set your desired action on line 11. There are several options here which are pretty basic and obvious. Just select the one that you want, and once this has been enabled, when you walk next to a corpse that fits the criteria, your character will automatically take the action that you've set up. It is that simple, but I do have a few words of warning. First of all, I don't always want to pulp a corpse, so I personally don't like this setting. I prefer to manually select which ones I deal with and how I want to do it. And then number 2, remember that this setting will still take time to execute that pulping action. I recommend that you only enable this setting when you need it rather than leaving it on at all times. If you leave it on, you will inevitably forget that it's enabled and the game will try to have you pulp a corpse when you're in a kind of vulnerable position. There are still pop-ups that warn you when there's an enemy that is approaching you, things like that, but those will still usually allow time to pass before they appear, which might put you in a dangerous situation. I personally do not use any of these auto options at all times. I pick and choose when I want to enable them because that is just what feels like the most safe thing for me to do. At the end of the day though, you can do whatever you want, and yeah, let's jump back to the video. But alright, let's move on. What happens when an enemy revives? Well, if it wasn't a zombie before, say it was an NPC that died, it will now become a zombie. If it is a creature that has a specific zombie form, such as the zombie bear that I mentioned earlier, it will become that particular zombie. If it was a humanoid that's been reanimated, it will also be naked. Unfortunately, this is just the way that the game is set up. Loot is generated when a creature dies, so when they revive, they are naked and they will not drop any loot the second time. This is the only way, really, to tell if an enemy has been revived or if it was spawned naturally. Hey everybody, this is me as the editor coming in with a last-minute addition to this video. Now, we talked about how zombies resurrect without their loot, but that has now been changed. I'm leaving it in the episode because of people who play on the last stable, but if you're on recent experimentals as of the time of this video's release, then it has been changed. Enemies will now resurrect with their gear and will no longer be naked. If you kill them again, they will drop the same items that they had before. This also means that there's no easy way to know if an enemy has been resurrected or not. When they revive, they will be somewhat damaged, but that heals over time, so there's no guaranteed way for you to know if an enemy was killed previously or not. Now, the final thing I want to touch on is that when an enemy is revived, the game does a check to see if it can evolve. Zombies in Cataclysm evolve over time, starting off as weak, basic enemies and eventually becoming strong endgame creatures. The game periodically checks enemies to see when or if they should evolve, and one of these checks takes place when an enemy is revived. So if you fail to pulp or dismember weak enemies and you come back later, there's a good chance they'll have come back as tougher enemies. Oh geez, and I have left out yet another thing in this video. I need to put it in here after editing. In the game, we also have some enemies that can force resurrect corpses even if the timer has not depleted. So you can kill an enemy and 5 seconds later, one of those special creatures will resurrect them. In fact, I think we have 2 or 3 monsters that do this now, although I'm not gonna lie, I don't know which ones are which. There are some enemies that also force upgrade zombies, and I always mix them up with those that revive, so yeah, I don't know which ones are which. Now, that's probably not very helpful, but it also is a spoiler that I don't really want to spoiler in the video, so yeah. Just try to remember that if you see something suddenly stand up, it may be the product of one of these special enemies nearby, and you should look around you and see what's going on. But alright, that is the basic information on enemy revives and how to deal with it. Now again, there are are mods that allow you to disable this feature, but I recommend that you leave this setting on. I hear a lot of new players complain about this mechanic, saying that it is tedious, and it is work that you need to do, but honestly, you very quickly get in the habit of pulping corpses after fights. Whenever you go to loot a zombie that you killed, you will just pulp the corpse right before or right after. And with this setting on, you will sometimes have to strategize or think about your choices. For instance, when I did the military base start, I shot quite a few zombies, but they were in a location where I could not easily reach them to pulp the bodies. I had to think about it strategically. Should I risk going out there to pulp them even if it might get me injured or exposed to a dangerous situation? And if I just keep clearing enemies, well, what if that takes more than 6 in-game hours? Then the previous enemies would be resurrecting and it would have all been for nothing. And it's those kind of micro choices that I actually kind of enjoy. Anyway, there's not a whole lot to say about this, but it is an important mechanic that new players need to be made aware of. I think we've covered it all. I mean, as far as I know, I can't think of anything else that's connected to this. Internet, thank you so much for watching, and I of course will be back with more tutorials in the near future. I will see you next time.